fronts. First in Russia, and new warnings of Moscow's reckless cyber assaults. And also from China, where there's word hackers went after some of our nation's biggest companies. The effect and the enormous ramifications. That's next. Chinese spies hacked American businesses using tiny microchips that they planted inside the computers. That's according to Bloomberg Businessweek. It's reporting now that the hack affected nearly 30 companies, including Amazon and Apple. But both companies deny the details of the report. We'll give you their responses in just a minute. Bloomberg calls this the most significant known supply chain attack ever against U.S. companies. Think of that. Though it reports hackers did not steal any users' information. The Fox Business Network's Susan Lee is here. Explain more about how they did this and what happened.
Okay, so it's very complex, very sophisticated. One hacking expert says it's like watching a unicorn jump over a rainbow. Here's how it worked. This involves computer servers. Servers basically store, transfer data. They were made by a company called Elemental. These Elemental computer servers then use these motherboards that were made by Supermicro. Microboards are like traffic cops. They basically direct data in the right direction that they need to go. So basically what authorities found, apparently, according to Bloomberg Businessweek, were these tiny grain of rice microchips that were inserted, these extra microchips that were inserted onto Supermicro motherboards. And what these extra chips did was it provided an access point for hackers to get into the system. And Shep, this is very scary because Elemental servers are basically used by the Defense Department, Navy warships, CIA drones.
Wow.
And then Supermicro, I mean, these motherboards were used by hundreds of companies, including Apple. In the end, according to Bloomberg Businessweek, they say that 30 companies were affected.
Yeah, I mentioned Apple and Amazon have responded.
Yeah, well, of course, they're refuting this report, right? So let's get to those responses. This is a 3-year investigation. We're going to start first with Apple then. Apple strong denial here. So Apple says that Apple has never found malicious chips, hardware manipulations, or vulnerabilities purposely planted on any servers. Let's flip on to Amazon because Amazon, their cloud computing arm called Amazon Web Services, AWS, actually bought Elemental that made those data servers in 2015, eventually selling it off to a Beijing company. Amazon says it's untrue that AWS knew about a supply chain compromise, an issue with malicious chips or hardware modifications when acquiring Elemental. And then what about Supermicro? We have to get to the company at the heart of these allegations, right? Supermicro says we remain unaware of any investigation. Supermicro delisted from the NASDAQ earlier this year.
Yep. The vice president talking about the Chinese and interference in the election.
Yeah, underscoring once again what President Trump has told us, right, that they are meddling in the midterm elections in November. They also talked about spying, tariffs, propaganda campaigns, and also warning against one tech giant that might be working with China.
Google should immediately end development of the Dragonfly app that will strengthen the Communist Party's censorship and compromise the privacy of Chinese customers.
Okay, so the Dragonfly app is what Google might be building, the censored search engine for China. Google issuing a statement after the vice president's statement. Google saying that our work on search has been exploratory and we are not close to launching a search product in China yet, I think.
A lot of words there.
Yeah.
Susan, thanks. Yeah. Now, new accusations against Moscow on hacking charges. The United States and some of our allies accusing Moscow's military spy agency of hacking chemical weapons investigations, Olympic athlete drug records, and plane crash investigations. The Justice Department announcing charges now against 7 Russian spies. And that came after Dutch and British officials made their own accusations against the Kremlin. Russian officials have denied the charges. Our State Department correspondent Rich Edson is live there with the news. Rich?
Shep, the United States is now responding to this. The Defense Secretary James Mattis says he's not surprised that the Kremlin would be behind such attacks. And he also says the United States is ready to stand behind whatever response our European allies have
got to pay the piper. They're going to have to be held to account. How we respond to something like this is a political decision by the nations involved, and we will be standing by them.
The British government claims that the Kremlin is behind cyber attacks that helped disrupt service on the Kiev metro, the Odessa airport, even the Russian central bank and a couple of Russian media agencies, among a host of other different charges there. The British Foreign Secretary says of the GRU, that's the Russian military intelligence outfit, quote, the GRU's actions are reckless and indiscriminate. They try to undermine and interfere in elections in other countries. This pattern of behavior demonstrates their desire to operate without regard to international law. The Russian response to all this, well, they say that the West is simply coordinating a propaganda campaign against the Kremlin, Shep.
And the Russians got caught doping back in the Olympics, and now the feds say the Russians tried to discredit the doping agencies.
That's right. Remember, Russian athletes were banned from 2016 and 2018 games, and these anti-doping agencies that uncovered this massive doping Kremlin-sponsored program for Russian athletes were the target of the Russian government. That's according to the Department of Justice, that said that the Russian government entered into this massive disinformation campaign to try to discredit those agencies, and that eventually they managed to steal information, medical information, private information for 250 athletes from nearly 30 different countries and release it to the public, Shep.
Rich Edson live for us. Rich, thanks a lot. Some breaking news. Air Force One has touched down now in Minneapolis. The local newspaper there, the Star Tribune, reports the crowds have already gathered, supporters and protesters alike, ahead of another Make America Great rally that's scheduled for tonight at Mayo Civic Center there. The president has touched down, and you figure in the middle of this win, what appears to be a pending win for the White House, rallying the troops tonight, the president should be in Minneapolis, and a big rally that's scheduled for there. We're expecting protesters, of course, as we've seen in Washington today, but it seems at least, unless something completely unforeseen happens, that this vote on Judge Kavanaugh is a fait accompli. Two of the three players involved here, two of the three swing votes have indicated at least that they think the investigation was thorough, that the investigation was fair. Seems as if their questions are answered, and though they haven't given up what their vote is going to be, if you're a betting person, I'd bet with the White House on this one. The news continues from Fox News Channel right after this. As the president has arrived in Minneapolis, that's Air Force One. As you can see, the door is open and the jetway is there and ready for him to deplane. The events today for the president are as follows. There's a round table in the afternoon in Minneapolis. Then one of those MAGA rallies, which starts 7:30 Eastern Time, 6:30 local. That's in Rochester, Minnesota, at the Mayo Clinic Civic Center. And there's the president now giving a wave. The Star Tribune, the local newspaper, says huge crowds have gathered and waited outside the Civic Center. This is a separate location, obviously, now where they're waiting to greet the president. But listen to this. The local paper reports that a guy named Randall Tom of Lakeville, Minnesota, has the first spot in the line to get in the rally tonight. He arrived at 5 o'clock in the morning yesterday and camped out overnight. He's a 58-year-old, according to the Star Tribune. Again, I'm reading this to you. Said this is his 41st Trump rally, that he started a group of diehard fans who call themselves Front Row Joes. He was wearing a cowboy hat with American flag design and said Trump would lead Republicans up and down the ballot to midterm election victories in November. And here's a quote from the Star Tribune. We're going to have a red tsunami. That's according to Front Row Joe Randall Tom of Lakeville. This is not to say that there are no protesters. There are. The local police say they've had a crowd of about 500 of them, I think, chanting white, black, or brown. We're all are welcome in our town. Rochester police estimating about 500 people involved in a march there this afternoon. And wait till we take you to the Civic Center in a minute, because we're, 3.5 hours away now from the rally. And wait till you see the inside of the place. We'll show you in just a minute. First, though, attorneys for Judge Kavanaugh's accuser, Dr. Christine Blasey Ford, sending a letter to the FBI director, and they're calling the investigation of the Supreme Court nominee a, quote, stain on the process, on the FBI, and on our American ideal of justice. They also included a list of witnesses they say that the FBI should interview. It's looking as if the president may make his way toward the microphones. I'm going to get to that subject matter in just a minute, because our Kristen Fisher is live up on Capitol Hill to give us a report on that particular matter from Blasey Ford's attorneys. But when the president comes to the microphone and works the rope line, let's listen. can't really hear now, but at the beginning, my producers tell me that somebody said, "What are you thinking of Kavanaugh, or how's Kavanaugh doing?" And then you heard the president's answer. He said, "I think he's doing very well." Listen here. Somebody just handed the president a dollar bill to sign. And sign it he did. I guess if you're president, you can do that. So think of it this way. This fight has been absolutely brutal. Doesn't matter your position on the set of affairs. It just doesn't matter. It has been brutal all the way around. But the end is clearly near. There's a vote coming. The final vote as early as Saturday. John Roberts says it could be Sunday, but it looks like it's a weekend event under all circumstances. And every indication is that Judge Kavanaugh is going to be confirmed and that the White House is going to win this battle. But the attorney for Christine Blasey Ford is saying, look, this is not how this was supposed to have worked. And our Kristen Fisher has a report on that from the Hill. Hi, Kristen.
Hey, Shep. Yeah, Dr. Ford's legal team is, let's just say that they are very unhappy about several things. They're upset that the FBI did not interview their client. They're upset that the FBI did not interview Judge Kavanaugh. And they're upset that the FBI didn't interview several other people, several other witnesses, people like Dr. Ford's husband, her polygraph examiner, and several of her friends. So in a letter today to the director of the FBI, Dr. Ford's legal team writes that, quote, none of those people were contacted, nor to our knowledge were more than a dozen other names we provided to the FBI whose interviews would have challenged the credibility of Judge Kavanaugh's testimony before the Senate Committee on the Judiciary. Now, the Judiciary Chairman, Senator Chuck Grassley, just held a press conference along with the Senate Majority Leader, Mitch McConnell. And at that press conference, I asked Chairman Grassley what he thought of Dr. Ford's legal team, what he thought of their characterization that this investigation was, and I'm quoting here, a stain on the process, on the FBI, and on our American ideal of justice. Here's what he said.
Let the FBI do what the FBI is hired to do and keep political interference out of it. And my making a call to the FBI that you ought to do something is political interference. I made no call to the FBI since this whole process started a week ago, and I'm not going to. I never had any conversation with anybody in the White House because I got confidence in the FBI.
That was Chairman Grassley really refuting the characterization by Dr. Ford and her legal team. As for Judge Kavanaugh, you know, everybody's been waiting to see if he might put out a response today, some sort of reaction, or perhaps somebody from his legal team. But so far, Shep, nothing.
All right, Kristen Fisher, thanks. An update for you. We've been waiting for new information on how senators are going to vote. We got a no from Heidi Heitkamp. She's a red state Democrat who says she's a no on Judge Kavanaugh. Another big Democrat who we're waiting to hear from is Joe Manchin of bright red West Virginia. He has just in the last minute or so entered the SCIF, as they call it, the secure room where the senators have been going to view the documents from the FBI. He's just entered. We haven't heard from Senator Joe Manchin of West Virginia, but you know there's a lot of pressure in that state for him to be a yes on Judge Kavanaugh. We'll know when we know, but should he come out and make a statement, we'll let you know. Now, I mentioned this big rally tonight in Rochester, Minnesota, and that at least one person arrived yesterday at 5 o'clock in the morning. The crowds have been huge all afternoon, and they're already filling up the arena. Our Alicia Acuna is inside, and you can see folks are there a good 3 hours early, huh?
Oh, very early and far earlier than what you were talking, Shep. It was amazing. I was watching the morning show this morning, and the local reporter, she had her looked like ski gear because it was really chilly. A storm came in, but people didn't care. They're here to get in here, and we are in Rochester, Minnesota, like you mentioned. This is Congressional District 1. It is one of 4 swing districts in the state of Minnesota, so you're talking about half of the voters in the state of Minnesota, which is part of the reason why President Trump is here. He's also giving a boost to Republican Jim Hagedorn, who we understand will be here with the president. He is running in CD1 here in Minnesota. Now, Hillary Clinton won the state of Minnesota in the presidential race in 2016 by 1.5 points. But in this district, President Trump won by a landslide. So he's here with a friendly crowd. So it shouldn't be a much surprise to anyone if he just continues on his defense of his judicial nominee, Judge Brett Kavanaugh. He has been defending his Supreme Court nominee, calling it in a rally earlier this week in Mississippi, saying that this is a process of being guilty until proven innocent with regard to the allegations against Kavanaugh, saying it is very dangerous for this country. Also noting that he had not met Judge Kavanaugh until recently, therefore he is not attempting to protect his friend, but the country. That, of course, was the same rally in which the president was widely criticized for appearing to mock some of the testimony by Dr. Christine Blasey Ford before the Senate Judiciary Committee, calling out her lack of detail on time and location of the assault that she says also happened so many years ago. So, Shep, things are getting set underway here at 7:30 Eastern Time, 6:30 local. Shep.
All right. Thank you, Alicia. Coming up, I'll talk with our senior Capitol Hill producer about what's going on behind the scenes there as senators weigh Judge Brett Kavanaugh's Supreme Court confirmation. I told you, Joe Manchin is now in there, presumably reading the information. Will a Democrat be a yes vote? And if so, might that Democrat be Joe Manchin of West Virginia? We don't yet know. Waiting for updates. We'll go for that. As the president's motorcade is making its way, a big day on schedule, a roundtable this afternoon, that MAGA rally tonight, 6:30 local time in Rochester, and a fundraiser in Minneapolis for a president who's seeing a win across the finish line. Dead ahead.
Deny thy father and refuse thy name. Or if thou wilt not be, but sworn my love, and I'll...
So she's telling Romeo to ditch his parents, and that she'll be his boo forever.
There are multiples on the table. One is cash, 3 are FHA, 1 is VA. So what can you do?
She's saying a whole lot of people want to buy this house. But you got this. Rocket Mortgage by Quicken Loans makes the complex simple. Understand the details and get approved in as few as 8 minutes by America's largest mortgage lender.
In the steel industry,